working on games including Whistball. Next up we have Jim Bagley, Spectrum Round Strat programmer and part of the special effects team. And then on my right, Mr. Simon Butler, who has been credited on over 250 games in his long and rewarding career. And finally, the software manager at Ocean, the teenage whiz kids all called him Dad. And his face was almost as familiar in the computer magazines as the games themselves. Once compared to a mad bull. Mr. Gary Brosley. Now there was supposed to be a PowerPoint presentation to go with the talk, but as you can see we have no projector, so you just have to imagine I've thrown something together. And the idea was to go through the letters of Ocean and to talk about things associated with letters. So we'll kick off with that. And O is for Origins. And Ocean started back in 1984. David Ward had been running a small company called Spectrum Games. But that was a rather confusing name. So with the help of an investor, John Woods, the end result was the new company Ocean, formed in Manchester. And after a few months, there was another cataclysmic event with the collapse of Imagine Software in Liverpool, and much of the talent moved across from Imagine to Ocean. And over the course of the next few years, Ocean grew into one of the biggest and best known companies for 8 and 16-bit software. So I'd like to pass on to the panel now and talk about how they first joined Ocean.
Right. I had the dubious pleasure of actually working for Imagine Software during the more sensible days, if they ever had any. I did one title. I was given 3 days to do it, and I did 2. It's the most profitable time of my entire career because they were mad with money. A company that would rather buy Formula 1 racing cars than pay bills, which is why they're not here anymore. I then worked for a small development team in Liverpool who were an outsourced team for Ocean, which is where I met Gary. And we did several titles of decreasing quality. They thought they would get away with it and pull the wool over Ocean's eyes for countless years and were proven wrong. I jumped ship, and to his credit, or not, depending on whichever way he sees it, Gary actually called me the next day and asked me to come in. And the rest, they say, is history. I had 2 periods with Ocean. Colourful, for many reasons, enjoyable for more reasons, and I wouldn't have done without them. And that's how I got it.
Gary, if you'd like to say a few words about how you joined Ocean?
I'll do it in rhyme. I started off in the video games business, having absolutely no technical or artistic talent, and I opened up a small computer game shop in Liverpool called Blue Chip. I knew John Woods particularly, and a little bit David Ward at the time. They used to run a wine bar in Liverpool, and we used to have stay behinds. And one day, I got a call from John Woods saying he was looking for someone who could look after the management of the development side of the company. They were relatively fledgling at the time. And I was a bit bored with retail, so I said, oh, I play games, I sell games, I can do it, I know about games. Knowing very little, really. So I joined Ocean back in, I think it was 86. And they had at the time a small team of in-house developers, including the likes of Dave Collier, the late Joffa Smith, Tony Pomfret, Mike Webb, Bill Barner, and the other main source of development was Denton Designs, or was it Canvas those days? Was it Denton? Canvas, which was where Simon was based, I think at the time, Nally Noble, and quite a few, John Gibson, quite a few of the others. And the first thing that was needed was to expand the in-house team, because Ocean were very, very dependent on a lot of external contracted developers. And Canvas notwithstanding, who did actually produce some good stuff, some better stuff from the external resource, we had real problems with the likes of Street Hawk and Knight Rider, which were legendary in their day, as never being delivered. I think they'll be ready in 2 weeks, actually. And the solution, thank you, was the solution to that was to bring more people in-house. And so gradually the in-house team grew, and we took on a lot more people, and we expanded in the dungeons of Ocean. We actually did live in this office in Central Street, which was a church, and the development side of that church was underneath, was in a catacombs, which we fondly named the dungeons. And there were these little booths and offices where all these guys worked at one time. No windows, no natural light. We occasionally threw burgers and pizzas in. And it became this actually marvellous place to work. And it sounds grim, it sounds awful. And I suppose from a perspective of a middle-aged person now, it probably is. But in those days, it was an absolutely magical place to work. And I'm sure they all agree that there was something about it. So I just continued with Ocean, helped them start up the US side, the Ocean of America, and obviously we got more and more into the movie licenses, which I was involved with, and it was just great. It was the golden age of video games, if you like. And what you have to remember is that in those days, there was no precedent. It was a brand new industry, and everyone, and all the guys at this table, were making it up as they went along, including myself. There were no rules, there were no precedents. So it was quite exciting and pioneering. Apart from the obviously creative element, there was the whole business element, the management element, how video games got developed, and it was quite pioneering, and it was great fun. And I am proud to have been a part of it. I'm very privileged to be here today to be speaking about it and having so many people interested. So thanks for coming. Here's Jim.
Jim. Although I wasn't on the books of Ocean, I did a lot of games for Ocean through special effects. Sorry, is that better?
Yeah.
So I'll start again. Jim Bagley. Although I wasn't on the books at Ocean, I was part of special effects, which was built up by two people, Paul Finnegan and the late Geoffrey Smith. It was started by them. They left Ocean to start up special effects, and consequently, with them having the contact at Ocean, they were doing games for Ocean, so we got a lot of the conversions of arcade games, like Cabal, Midnight Resistance, movie games like Hoods of War, and obviously the basically we got the dregs that no one else wanted. And it was passed on to us, and hopefully, well, I assume we did a good job because the games are still selling today, which is a nice compliment. I did have the joy of going to the Ocean offices quite a few times, and yes, it was dark and damp and dungeons. Probably health and safety, I've something to say about it now, especially the lack of windows and everything. But like I said, it was really good times, and the atmosphere was absolutely fantastic. I used to always love going to the Ocean offices. The games that they were making there, and hopefully the games that we were making as well at special effects, were, like Gary said, it was our way of making the games. There was no rules, we just had to make it up as we went along. As long as we write platforms, credits, and out in 2 weeks.
Alright, I'm Mark Jones. I was known as Junior
in Ocean because there was two of us, two Mark Joneses, and I was the younger one. I started off. I used to play Spectrum games when I was at school. I'd buy Crash magazine and we'd all get Smashes, and in between playing games, I did just some, graphics just to mess around with. And I left school in 1986. I worked in a computer shop for a while. And I showed someone there, the boss, the stuff that I'd done, and he was like, "Why don't you send it off so you can get a job?" And so I did, not expecting to get anywhere. But then I had an interview at Elite, which was in somewhere in Birmingham. It was horrendous place. And I had an interview at Ocean, and I was so young that my interview at Ocean, I went with my mum. So it was me and my mum in Gary's office, and Gary interviewed me, and then a couple of days later he offered me a job. So but originally I didn't want to move there because I thought I hadn't been on a train on my own, let alone moved to a different town. But I had a good think about it over Christmas, and I moved up to Manchester in January. And the first game I worked on was the Whizball conversion of Spectrum. The Spectrum conversion of Whizball, which was sort of developed as Sensible Software were making the Commodore one. So every now and again, one of Sensible would come down and bring the updated version, and I'd then sit there with a pen and a pencil, writing it all down, drawing the drawings, putting them on Spectrum. I was there for 2 or 3 years, so I worked on Spectrum mainly. I did some Amstrad stuff, and then the last things I did were on the Enigma Mix team. So that's how I started.
Okay, thanks very much. And so then C is for conversions, and Ocean got, rightly, a good reputation for arcade conversions after signing a deal with Konami, and then later the movie titles, movie tie-ins. And it was an interesting process, as I think Simon said in a previous talk, that how do you turn a film like Platoon into a game for 12-year-olds? And Gary, I'm sure you'll say in a moment, they had access often to scripts and even occasionally to the actual film stage as the film was being made. But can you imagine the pressure of trying to make a game come out at the same time as a film when you've got a set deadline and doing something complex on an 8-bit machine? So I'd like to go along the panel and ask, what was your favourite conversion, either from an arcade game or from a film?